Hello and welcome back to New Vegas, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, where today we're going to be talking about the tire iron, because this one has been requested a decent amount for some odd reason. I think it's more of just a joke, because the tire iron is not particularly a crazy weapon in any way in Fallout. It really has never been. I think it's only been in Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3. I don't remember it being in Fallout 4. I could be wrong about it being in earlier games too. So let's talk about the tire iron, a tool that's been turned into a makeshift bludgeon. And this is probably going to be one of the very first blunt weapons that you get access to early on. However, it's definitely not one of the strongest, nor is it potentially the first melee weapon that you can find, especially if you have some of the DLCs where you can start out with like the broad machete and have an advantage there. So the tire iron can be found all throughout the wasteland. It's pretty common for low-level enemies, at least human enemies, to potentially have tire irons. You can find these in a couple of places. Vendors tend to sell them pretty often too. You can buy them from like Chet, you can buy them from the Mojave outpost down south. I'm pretty sure you can buy them in Prim as well. So there's at least a decent amount of places that you can buy tire irons, and none of them are really going to be all that expensive. For the base stats of the tire iron, this requires 0 melee to wield effectively and only 3 strength. Again, if you're going with a strength build, you're probably going to have plenty of strength, so that's not a huge deal. You'll hit these no problem, which is pretty good because you can find these on powder gainers really early on and the escaped convicts really early on. So if you wish to take a tire iron, you absolutely can. This does 15 damage a hit, which is kind of low. It's not on the higher side, but it's okay for the early game. This does 35 damage per second, which is actually pretty decent. The tire iron does attack at least relatively fast. This does 15 crit damage, which again isn't really that high, but it's about on par with most other weapons where they do the same crit damage as their regular damage, just added on. This has a 1x crit modifier, so average crit chance. This costs 27 action points to use in VATS, which is kind of on the higher side, at least compared to some of the early melee weapons that we've already talked about, namely the machete in this case, where you kind of have a better option just in like the broad machete overall for action point costs. There's a couple other weapons that you can use for fairly low cost points too. This does have the unique VATS attack Lights Out. Any of the VATS attacks with melee you unlock once you hit 50 melee in total. Lights Out makes so you do a little bit more damage, but it costs you a little bit more action points. So it's a slightly stronger attack that you might be able to squeeze out if you're nearly out of action points and you got just enough to do it. Your person will also charge forward and then swing the tire iron down on top of an enemy's head, which, I mean, kind of looks interesting in VATS, although it does make it so enemies can attack you pretty often in VATS because you don't do this action particularly fast. This is also your power attack, and it's a power attack of a couple other weapons similar to this, like I believe it's the same as Lead Pipe, it's the same as the War Club. This one weighs 3 weight, so it's fairly lightweight, and this one has 200 item HP, so it actually has a lot of health, especially in the early game. That's the same as Brass Knuckles, I believe, that we talked about a couple videos ago. So it's not going to break very fast, which is pretty cool, and it's really not going to be hard to find tire irons to fix your tire iron up with. It's going to be even easier once you have something like jury rigging where you can fix it with any one-handed melee, but that's just a really nice advantage of melee in New Vegas anyway. For the pros of this weapon, there's actually not very many. It has high item HP for the start, so it's not going to break really quick, and it is an early game melee weapon, which is good. It is also, I guess, technically a melee weapon, so it has a lot of really good perks that go to it. There isn't any perk specifically that goes to the tire iron, but just generally good melee perks like Slayer, Super Slam, Piercing Strike are all going to make this even better than it already is, as well as you could build more action points because melee is quite good in a VATS build, even if the special attack from this isn't really anything too crazy. It's just kind of nice extra damage, so it does kind of have that going for it. For the general cons though, it's kind of everything else. This has low stats across the board. It's not really that high. Even for the early game, you can grab something like the shovel in Good Springs, and the shovel will outcompete the tire iron overall, since it has a higher crit chance, it has higher damage, it has a better VATS attack in it. So all of those, you might as well just do that if you want a blunt weapon, and it's a big two-handed weapon, so it's even got longer reach as well. Other weapons like the broad machete that I've been mentioning throughout this video would also be a better option most of the time than the tire iron, although the tire iron does have more health than it. But the broad machete will do more damage per second. Same thing goes with some of the other weapons like Brass Knuckles. If you're going with an unarmed mix with a melee build, which you probably are, if you're going with one, you usually go with the other since they have so many perks that overlap with one another. All of those would kind of be better options than something like the tire iron. This does fall off pretty hard as well. It might be decent in the early game because you don't have to worry about the health, but as soon as you get something better than this, it's kind of just downhill from there, especially since you could just buy something like a baseball bat and mod it out, and that would also be a better option. And a lot of vendors sell them if you have the Gunrunner's Arsenal DLC, so that would be really nice. There's also no unique variant of the tire iron whatsoever either, which is interesting. At least in Fallout 3 there was, and in Fallout New Vegas there is no unique variant, it's just the regular tire iron, so you don't really have any upgrade path for this. So for an overall rating on my tier list, I would give the tire iron a D tier. It's not going to go to F tier because it's not a totally obsolete, useless weapon, because it is a melee weapon and it is kind of useful in the early game because of its item health, but it does fall off really hard. Basically nobody's going to be using this for the end game unless you're just carrying it around because you want to kill a specific named character with a tire iron. Fair enough. I mean, I get that. It's kind of the same thing with carrying around any weapon to kill named characters. Could be the same reason why you carry around a golf club to bash Mr. House's head in. I mean, that one does count for an achievement. Tire iron can also count for an achievement too. It counts for the one that's Thin White Line or something like that. It's the Mad Max reference, where if you're killing the various raiders with certain Mad Max style weapons, and the tire iron is one of those. Machete is also one of those that we talked about a couple videos ago, and then it also includes things like the sawed-off shotgun and a 44 Magnum. So there's plenty of options there, but it's pretty cool that it spans so many different weapon classes, so you can kind of kill them with whatever and still have something there, I think maybe besides energy weapons. But yeah, I think tire iron goes D tier. It's not really that good. It's not terrible. Again, it's melee, so it's pretty hard to make melee terrible. There are a couple that are terrible. So tell me your thoughts on the tire iron down in the comments below. How do you enjoy using it? Do you ever use it? I rarely use it at all. I mean, I used it for this video and I've used it for a couple other videos, but it's usually been for challenge things, not really for like a melee run. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye bye, everybody.